All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Good morning. It is the Mark Thompson Show. Mark Thompson off today. I'm Kim McAllister filling in, and Tony is along with me for today.
Hey.
Hi, Tony.
Hey.
Got a big show planned. First of all, we're going to talk immigration because the drop-off in traffic at the border is pretty significant, and I have questions about how we're doing it, whether it's worth it to do things fast rather than to go about it the right way by the rule of law. The person that stands out the most to me to be able to talk border issues is former ABC White House correspondent Jim Avila. So we'll get to him in just a moment. Mark sat down with Mike Papantonio, who's a lawyer and the author of a new thriller called The Middleman. And so we'll have that conversation for you. David Cay Johnston will be along. It's Tech Tuesday, so Jefferson Graham will be here. So it's a full show, and I'm glad that you're here for it. And so, yeah, let's do it right now because I don't want to keep Jim Avila waiting. You have a guy like this, you don't let him sit by the sidelines, Tony. No. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Let's get to him. He's here. He's standing by. Let's do it.
He is, as mentioned, former White House correspondent. He has been working in San Diego near the border, and he's done some special reporting on that issue. It is Jim Avila, everyone. Hi, Jim.
Good morning, Kim. Good morning, Tony.
Hi, thank you for joining us. So I saw this. Let me play the video first because I saw this video about the border, and I wanted to get right to it. The traffic at the border has plummeted, and there's a station in Washington D.C., the ABC affiliate, and they had some pretty dramatic reporting. Let's watch. Okay, so that's pretty dramatic. I also wanted to play a video for you, Jim Avila, with President Trump aboard Air Force One, and he's talking to reporters and he's touting his success and saying this is, there's never been anything like this, that he's doing things so well, and you can see it because of the border traffic. And I have a question for you about that, but let's watch this video of Trump talking to reporters aboard Air Force One. I think Tony's got the video.
Most people are saying that, and it's an honor. We're bringing back our country. We're respected as a country again, and we're strongly respected. And people are amazed. I was with some very important people today, and they said that they've never seen a turnaround of a country as fast as this. Even look at our border. We have nobody coming in. And you can come into our country, but you have to come in legally. But we have nobody coming in to our country. It's almost shut down. They've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, we've never seen anything like this. So he's saying that he's successful because the border traffic is down. And I wonder, is that true, Jim Avila? Does that make him a success? Because I would argue that no one wants criminals in the United States. No one wants gang members in the United States, but scooping them up so that you have people that perhaps aren't gang members being sent to these horrible prisons or stomping all over the Constitution to get this done fast. I don't necessarily know that the ends justify the means and that equals success.
Well, there are a couple things. You have to go back just a little bit. So the numbers at the border began to go down in the last quarter of 2024. Joe Biden was president at that time. The reason why that the numbers have gone down is because most of those who are coming across the border not at the entry points, but through the wall or through cracks in the fences, that kind of thing, were actually asylum seekers. So those are people who were coming from all kinds of countries around the world who believed that they were suffering persecution, from their governments. And so they came to the United States, the land of the free, home of the brave, to start over and to try to live in peace. Biden started at the end of his term because they knew that immigration was a real problem and that Donald Trump was making points on that. They eliminated the asylum. You could not come across the border. So the law says, as soon as you touch ground in the United States, no matter where you touch ground, and this is still the law, you can apply for asylum. And so you come across, and I've seen this myself in covering the border for years. People come across, they see a Border Patrol person in green, and they run towards them, not away from them, because the Border Patrol agents, all they have to tell the Border Patrol agents is, I'm here for asylum, and they have to answer a few questions that say that distinguish them as asylum seekers and that they're afraid to go back to their country. And therefore, once that became out, the cartels know the rules and know what's going on. When they heard that was happening, they instructed all of their people who came across, who they brought across, whether they were asylum seekers and genuinely asylum seekers and in danger from their countries or not, to tell the Border Patrol agents that that's why they were here, and the Border Patrol agents had to accept them into the country, and they became so full that they couldn't keep them in custody while they waited for their court dates. They just began releasing them in the United States. So that's what was going on in February of 2024. Biden stopped it at the end of 24. Word got out, and then it continued under Trump. No asylum. Continued under Trump. And so people now know, because cartels tell them, that that's not going to work anymore. You have to go to the port of entry. And so that's what's happening now. That's why. So can Trump take credit for it? Sure. So can Biden. Mm-hmm. Is it? So the other part of your question was, does it trample on our Constitution and our laws?
The way in
and
which
it does, and our way of life. Yeah, it does, because the law says that we are a place where you can apply for asylum, and that you can come, and once you get here, no matter how you get here, and this happens in Florida as well. The Cubans were coming across. They stepped on the United States, and they asked for asylum. Mm-hmm. Well, that rule that law has now been eliminated. Not on the books. It's no longer enforced. And in fact, what happens is now you have to get on an app. The government has delivered. For those who don't know, the government has now, Biden started this, developed an actual app on phones that the asylum seekers have to stop in Mexico near the border. Mm-hmm. Then they get on the app, they apply for an appointment to go to the border crossing, to the actual points of entry, and then they get to apply for asylum. So that's what's happened. There isn't a huge crush of people at the border anymore.
Right.
Both Biden and Trump can take credit for it, and the American people seem to accept it and want it to continue. The polls show that they even support deportation, and that's I'll let you ask another question, but I have another thing to say. But
no, please go ahead.
So the other problem is that what the Republicans did is they took 2 or 3 incidents where criminals assaulted women or committed crimes. Mm-hmm. There are like 2 or 3 of those.
Kate Steinle,
in reality,
Riley, right.
Right.
And in reality, they made big touch point issues.
Right. Huge, in the Republican propaganda machine, they made that a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, the people who come across the border, even then, were coming across to work. San Diego and border towns across this country have the lowest crime rates in the country. San Diego is one of the safest cities. It's in the top 5 of the safest cities every year. So immigrants are not coming across the border and committing crimes here or anyplace else. And studies show repeatedly that immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal, commit fewer crimes than Americans who are here legally and who were born here. That they just, but they created this fear, which the Republicans are very good at doing, and with Fox News and the rest, these caravans of criminals coming across. None of that was true. In fact, it was exposed that some of the video that Fox was using wasn't even from the United States or from the border. It was from Syria or places like that. So, they misled the country into abandoning our values. And, that's why the French even said, maybe we should take back the Statue of Liberty.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, that is not, so that's what's happened. And it really has changed, but Americans seem to be okay with that change. And until, and I don't even think that if the Democrats were to win in the midterms, that they'll look at immigration and try to change it. That's not the pinch point in our democracy right now. I mean, what's gonna hurt Trump and the reason that that the Democrats have a chance of winning again in the midterms is because of his autocratic oligarchy. He wants to be king, and then now he's talking about extending and going for a third term. Those are the things that resonate with Americans and that are hurting him in the polls, not immigration.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was talking with Tony before the show, and we're talking about the fact that people were whipped up into this anger. And in Tony's mind, it seems to be somewhat justified. He was telling me about a friend whose family lives near the border in Arizona, and they have horses, and the horses get stolen, and their fields get trashed with people coming through. Those are people in border states maybe that are feeling the effects. And perhaps it's this manufactured anger, but it seems like people are done with laws not being enforced and want laws to be enforced and want people that are not here legally to go. There's not a lot of sympathy for people that maybe came here seeking a better life. I found something really interesting in that report from ABC in Washington, D.C., that there are packages now being offered to people, travel packages, to get back to where you came from. And the reporting indicates that there are a lot of people that are self-deporting, that are looking and kind of seeing the situation here and saying they'd really rather not be in America.
Yeah, those are two issues. Okay, let me address first Tony's concern.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to those places. I've talked to those ranchers. There are people right along the border in Arizona, especially, and some in Texas, where people come across illegally and they dispose of whatever they brought to get across. And yes, but crime rates again are not high in those places. They're coming across to go through. They don't want to stop. They're not stopping in Arizona, except for maybe to get some food. So the crime rates remain low. The specific ranchers right across the border, yes, they do suffer some with some trash being on their property, and I had not heard of stolen horses before. It could be happening. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. The second issue you brought up has to do with deportation. So many people who are here illegally who don't have their papers are afraid that they're going to be picked up by ICE in the middle of the night, separated from their families, and sent back to their home countries. So what they are doing is some of them are self-deporting. We are seeing that phenomenon, and it's because the random nature. Trump claimed that he was going to deport. They were going to go after criminals first, but as we've seen, he's deporting everybody. So it's not, if you happen to be at work in a place, they're doing raids on places of business in across the country. Those are not criminals. Those are people working, and they're sending them back. So that message is getting across to people who are here and are law-abiding. And many of them have been here for years, 10 years or so, and they're getting sent back. There are people now getting sent to El Salvador. I mean, there's a guy today in the news, a guy who was sent to that prison in El Salvador who, by mistake.
Yeah.
And the Trump administration says they can't do anything about it. They're not even trying to get him out, even though he didn't deserve to go there. He has no criminal record whatsoever. And they sent him there, and they're going to leave him there. The cruelty with the way this is being done is what Americans should step up against. And that, and not only that, we're beginning to see, I saw in the paper today, places, cities like in Minnesota, who they can't harvest their crops.
Yeah.
California is going to have some of that problem too.
Right.
So we're going to see when you send all the working people back, or when they decide it's too scary to be here anymore, it's going to affect our economy, and it's going to affect our workforce.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't see any Americans wanting to go work in the fields or even in the hot kitchens of our restaurants.
Right.
That's just not happening.
No. I mean, the truth is, the cold hard truth is, we need these people because we've based our economy off paying people so little to do jobs that are backbreaking, that citizens that can make more money don't want to do. And so then those jobs that are crucial get left empty, and now what?
Well, that's true. And what's happening is that we've set up an entire economy that is based on that, and the unemployment rate is low. So it's not that Americans are going without jobs.
Yeah.
They have jobs, so they just have better jobs, and we're using immigrants, and this speaks to the entire problem of immigration. There needs to be a comprehensive immigration reform, so that allows legal immigration, whether it be worker programs. We've had in the past in this country programs where people can come across, and we still have some of them in some cases, and they can work and then they can go home. We need that. We need also, the courts, in order to come across in the United States or to get here legally, it can take up to 20 years for people to get through, 10 to 20 years. That is unacceptable, and that's why people do what they're doing. That's why they're so desperate to get across. So, they need to fix the border, but they also need to fix the court system that would make it a smoother transition. They need to change laws so that there are worker programs. There are worker programs for businesses like schools and doctors and things like that, that allow people in to work. There's not as many agricultural programs as there is needed, or programs that allow people to come in if they have a job, if they can, at a restaurant and stay, and that's a problem.
It seems, though, especially for people that are angry over the issue of immigration, that.
Why are they angry, Kim? They're not affected. I live in San Diego. I have no fear whatsoever. They're angry because they've been pumped up by BS. They're afraid they're going to be Lincoln Riley. Well, Lincoln Riley was. I mean, the number of people that happens to. It's terrible when it happens, but it happens. People don't get as riled up when it happens when it's American crime versus American crime. I mean that it's rare that an undocumented immigrant commits a crime, and they're pumped up and they're stoked up and they want it to end, but it's because of I'll use their term, because of fake news.
You see these people that are angry over immigration because they may have been pumped up over fake news, or they may have somehow been affected. Maybe they got into an accident and the person didn't have a driver's license, was here in an undocumented fashion. So they feel like they've been wronged in some way.
Do you know anybody that's happened to, Kim?
I do. I think it happened to Tony, I believe.
Yeah, it happened to me.
Tony got in an accident with, the person didn't have a
fake license, fake everything, fake registration, everything. Yeah.
And did your insurance cover it?
I still had to pay my deductible, so I had to pay it all for the repairs. Yeah. And when I called the cops, I was like, they have nothing. They're like, if no one's hurt, no one's coming.
And so let me ask you this, Tony.
Yeah.
Do you think there are more uninsured motorists who are Americans than there are that are immigrants?
It's not the one who hit me, though.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
because that car shouldn't have been on the road. I know. But I'm just saying, the one that hit me, I had the California special. So.
Okay.
I
think it's pretty rare. I think it's pretty rare.
I know. It's what happened to me, though.
Like that, yeah. You hear a story like that, and people are. I think that may be what allows this, whipped up news to inflame people even further. And then you get people not really having much empathy and not caring what happens to people. And I guess my argument is, even if you don't care what happens to people who, in my mind, are just trying to make a better life for themselves, still, if you're a patriot, you should care about the Constitution and you should care about the rule of law. So is the place that we find ourselves in, where Trump is, you could say partially Biden's rules as well, but we're seeing this massive drop off in border traffic, and maybe people that are angry about this situation look and say, oh, well, at least somebody's doing something finally, right? We can see results now. Are we trading who we are as Americans so that we can get results? How can we get results but still go about it in a way that we don't lose ourselves?
Well, we have to change. We have to have the comprehensive immigration reform, and there needs to be new laws. The last time that attempted was in 2015. I covered that. It was in D.C. at the time. Here's the names of the people who signed on to that comprehensive immigration reform: Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, Jeff Flake, John McCain. Republicans and Democrats proposed this comprehensive bill, which would have added to the Border Patrol, which would have included more technology at the border to stop the illegal immigration, and would have provided for a path to citizenship for those who were here already and who had not broken the law, would have installed more judges to take up the asylum claims. That was so. Back at that time, before MAGA, there was the Tea Party, and the Tea Party undercut that and killed it. And it hasn't been able to. There hasn't been since then a comprehensive program to get that done. There was something close that the Biden administration proposed, and that both the Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate were for, and Donald Trump, just before the election last year, killed it, told his people not to vote for it because it would have solved the problem, and he wanted the problem so he could run on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he did. Now, is the border safe? Is the border less of a problem right now? It is. But I think there are going to be unintended consequences that we're going to see with the labor force and with the fact, we don't, so they say Social Security even, because it's going to be a problem because we're not producing enough Americans to pay into Social Security to pay for the next generation. Right. We need immigrants, and what we're doing is we're telling immigrants to go home, and that's going to be a problem. Not only does it affect, as you say, who we are as Americans. I mean, America's that bright shining light that people look to, and yeah, they came here, but now we're turning that around.
Yeah. And that breaks my heart that we don't stand for those ideals anymore. As you say, time to give back the Statue of Liberty, take down the poem. We're closed for business.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
think
Jim Avila.
both practically and spiritually.
Yeah, it's true.
Eventually, there are going to be unintended consequences.
One of my favorite parts of being on the Mark Thompson Show is getting to speak with you. Jim Avila, I'm so grateful that you took the time today. It's always enlightening, and you're so wise and learned on these subjects. So thank you for coming in, and thank you for talking to us. And I will see you on Friday.
All right, my pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. Bye, Jim Avila. Jim Avila, everybody. Done a lot of reporting down at the border and has seen things firsthand. So yeah, I did see this come through from Wes. I wanted to put this out there. Wes says, with a $5 super chat, thank you, Wes. Grady Judd here in Florida, we love Grady Judd, don't we? Has been announcing when people are here illegally during his arrest updates, there are many immigrants committing crimes. So here's what I think, given what Jim Avila just said, I would say to that. It's likely that if Grady Judd put numbers up of people that are here legally committing crimes right next to the number of people who are here illegally committing crimes, the illegal number would dwarf the number of people that are here legally committing crimes. But because he calls it out, it probably seems like it's an awful lot. And perhaps it is. I haven't seen the numbers and I don't know. But thank you for the comment and thank you for the super chat. Tony, did you have a comment?
No. I'm just being on the screen.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So thank you, Wes. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the super chat and the comment. Right now, I want to play for you a conversation that Mark Thompson had with Mike Papantonio. I love his last name. And I also love that he's this high-powered attorney. He has a podcast here on YouTube, and he has a brand new book out. It's called The Middleman, and it's a thriller, and it is based on his experience as an attorney and his creative mind. So let's roll it, Tony, if we could. This is Mark and Mike Papantonio.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah. What up, everybody? Excited to have an author in who is not only an author, but a lawyer. He's been something of an activist lawyer with some high-profile cases involving the environment. He has, in a sense, he's developed this robust world of authorship as a writer, while he's already had this robust world as a lawyer, as a litigator. And he seems to be on the right side of a lot of things. And so it is with his latest. His latest, The Middleman, is a drama of whistleblowers, there's a lot of, typically in his stuff, of kind of, it's got a thriller aspect, and I'll let him tell us more, but it involves always legal combat, and one of his favorite characters who shows up in this novel as well, but, and again, it's called The Middleman, and you'll understand why it's called The Middleman as we welcome Mike Papantonio, everybody. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Mark, how are you? Thanks for the invitation, man.
Yeah, so excited to talk to you. You know, you do such great writing, and I'm going to get to the writing in a second. And you so dutifully put the book up there, just like a good author will, to show everybody this is what the cover looks like. I'll have a link to buy the book under this video. So, before I get right to your author, you know, you're a prolific author, but I'm really curious about your background because you are a lawyer. You have your own podcast, I know. I mean, you're you know, I feel like you're someone who has been out in the zeitgeist in different ways. Tell me about the legal cases that involve the environment that you've been involved in.
Well, it started really with, you know, we launched the tobacco case in America. This law firm, my law firm, did launch the first tobacco case, which ended up, you know, at least bringing a little bit of a closure to the problem. Then we also handled the opioid case, the national opioid case. That was our case. The human trafficking case. The stuff we do is not 1-800 car crash. It's kind of, they're bigger social issues. You know, we don't do 1-800 car crash, but we do cases that at the end of the day, we hope it makes a difference. So these books all come out of that. This is book number 6. 7 comes out not far behind this, but it's written based on the cases. So it's not a big leap to leave court and say the damnedest thing happened today. Let me put it down in a chapter. Let me tell the story. I think a lot of times, Mark, people are they're busy. Okay, they got to work. They got to pay bills. And they don't have time to get the backstory. And as you know, in this business, you've been at this a long time too, corporate media is wholly dysfunctional. Okay, the idea of getting corporate media to even explain this story, much less explain to the American public how serious this is a big leap. The environmental cases, they were the same way. For example, nobody ever heard of PFAS until I tried the first 5 cases that were tried in the country. And then all of a sudden,
forever chemicals, right?
Yeah, forever chemicals, what they use to make Teflon pans. And unfortunately, they also cause kidney cancer and testicular cancer. And the industry knew about it when they were dumping millions, tens of millions of gallons into the waterways. Now, everybody in the world, literally, virtually everybody in the world has this in their system to some degree. Polar bears, for example, in the North Pole have it in their liver. Well, it shows you how ubiquitous that is. But those are the kinds of environmental cases I've handled over the years. And but I've handled a really variety. I guess we've handled 87 of the largest pharmaceutical cases in the country, everything from Yaz to Vioxx, name it. And so it's kind of a specialty. And it gives me the ability to take those stories and fictionalize them, obviously. Sometimes you wonder if the murders are actually going to take place and whether you're going to be the victim when you're, you know, going toe to toe with these international corporations. But so they're dressed up for a fiction story. The goal, Mark, is to be able to sit on a beach, read Middleman, for example, and have a good story. I mean, I avoided writing nonfiction for a real reason. Nonfiction has a tendency, it's a different market. People want to be entertained when they have to take on big topics like this. And when you can be entertained and come away and say, I wonder how much of this is true. Let me Google it. Let me look at it. Most of the Middleman is absolutely true. The characters are all created, and the vehicle, the mobster vehicle that's created that drives this story is a creation. But I think the reason these books sell so well is because people are able to say, I learned something and I was entertained. Well, so that's the goal here.
Yeah, and one of the things that you do in the backdrop is the word I'm looking for, against which you set your action is, as you say, there's a reality, and there's an intricate reality when it comes to pharmaceutical companies that some may be aware of, but maybe not everybody, and it does have to do with the middlemen. This is an interesting aspect to the pharmaceutical world in this country. They're called pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs.
Mm-hmm.
Speak to us about what they are, what their role is, and how they have an oversized place at the table.
Yeah, if you were to line up 100 people in a room, Mark, and you were asking what a PBM, maybe 2 could tell you what it is. I call it's a legal fiction. It was created out of the insurance industry in cooperation with the pharmaceutical industry. And the idea was to have this thing in the middle Pharmacy company makes the drug. It goes through the middleman, and then the middleman is the distribution vehicle to the pharmacies. Here's the problem. The middleman is completely and wholly unnecessary. There is no need for a middleman to even exist. I set it up in the book because this is the closest way I can describe it. The mobsters in New York, when they want to take control of a neighborhood, go knocking on the doors and they say, "Hey, how would you like protection?" And what do you mean protection? Well, you'll see what I mean. If you don't buy my protection, you'll see what I mean. This is what PBMs do. Let me explain it. A drug is made. Pfizer makes a drug. It goes through the middleman level. The middleman makes the determination of how much the drug costs, and even worse than that, Mark, they make the determination of, is that drug something we're going to be able to distribute to pharmacies and have the insurance pay for it? Follow me? Sure. They make there may be 5 drugs that do exactly the same thing that one drug does, but the PBM makes the decision, what are we going to let go? What are we going to let through the system? And they get it's extortion. They get kickbacks to do that. They call them rebates. They dress it up. Oh, this is a rebate. Well, what the hell's a rebate? This rebate is nothing more than a kickback. Or they say, well, there are administrative fees for me having to do this, company having to do all this, and so you have to pay us money. Well, what they're paying money for is so that drug can end up at a drugstore. And there's no explanation for it. There's no regulation. This is a company that makes 3 companies make $150 billion every year. And everybody scratches their head and say, I wonder why that happened. There's no excuse for why it happened, Mark. There's no justification whatsoever. So you have the kickbacks. You have it's basically payola. You know, it's pay to play. We'll put your drug out there, but you're going to have to pay us, buddy. And every year they raise that amount a little bit more to where they're taking as high as 40% of the total cost of that drug for mom and pop, for their insurance company to have to pay.
And the insurance company relationship with the PBMs, is that one that is inextricably linked? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, you would think that the insurance company, well, they're just out there and we're finding vertical integration. We're finding where the PBM itself is buying up pharmacies, right? And then they say, you can only buy this drug at our pharmacy. And the insurance company is all part of that. It's all just this ugly web. The insurance industry came up with this idea to begin with because they thought it was going to be beneficial for, well, I can't say that. They didn't think it was going to be beneficial for consumers. They don't care about consumers. They thought it'd be beneficial for their bottom line because they thought the PBM could jack up the price before it got to the pharmacy. Well, that's what they did. And so now we have a system that co-pays every year. You know, Mark, there are people that are living and having to make decisions like this. Do I buy this drug or do I eat tonight? Right. Do I have to split my pill in half so I can pay my rent? That's how bad it is in this country right now.
And you speak of this country, so by comparison, there aren't these PBMs in other countries? Is that why they spend a fraction of what we do on pharmaceutical drugs?
They think it's a joke. Okay, for example, we pay insulin's a great example. The drug that drives through this story is insulin. Insulin costs $98 here. It costs $7 in Australia. It costs $10 in Canada, maybe $12 at the outset. So what in effect, what we're doing is we're subsidizing the low cost of drugs in other countries, right? Because the company ends up paying that. They have to say, we have to get paid somewhere, right? Their argument is always, well, it's so expensive because we have to do R&D. Well, that's a ridiculous argument. An absolutely absurd argument. 70% of the drugs that are on the market, you know where they came from? taxpayer research at universities.
And we
The
reap
drug
none of those
company-
benefits as taxpayers, just the opposite, as you're pointing out.
Oh, absolutely. So the drug company comes in, Harvard develops a new drug, they get the patent, insurance, the company gets the patent, Pfizer gets the patent, Merck gets the patent, and then they call it theirs. Insulin's a great example. The fella that developed insulin was in Canada. He gave the patent to Canadian universities. He gave it to them, paid $1. Today, that same $1 is what it costs $2 to produce the product now, and they sell it $98 as high as $275. So the PBMs are all part of that. And it's not getting, there's no easy out on this. This is going to take huge congressional action. And unfortunately, the people that are at the helm at the congressional level have gotten so much money from the PBMs. I mean, we're talking about multi-millions of dollars.
Sure.
And so the idea of expecting them to do the right thing, oddly enough, I'll tell you this, the surprise of all surprises is this is high on the Trump agenda now. And why? Because look, he wants to come out having done away with the PBMs, because he knows if he does away with the PBMs, you can drop the price of that drug by about 40%, right? And what else that does, Mark, is it passes on that extra expense to Europe, Canada, and Asia, where they have to pay their part of the cost of this. So I'm hoping.
By the way, that's interesting to me from two standpoints. First of all, you know, he had a sort of a populist message.
Yes.
And so this would feed that. I mean, this would serve that. And number two, he talked a lot about reducing the cost of drugs in this country in his first term. Mike, he had 4 years to take a crack at it. Why do you think he did?
Well, he did. He actually did. When we heard that, and I'm apolitical. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm talking to you just from what the research and my experience in this business. He actually had a plan to have a dramatic reduction where, for example, you would Medicare, Medicaid, any government entity would actually have to, they would bid on a price. Okay, the company did not have the right to come in and say, this is what we're going to pay. The government had to say, hell no, we'll give you half of that or a quarter of that. That's where he was going. Biden came in and just absolutely reversed all that. Biden said, okay, I'm going to allow it to some degree. We're going to let 10 drugs, only 10 drugs, out of the thousands of drugs, we're going to allow 10 drugs to go through that process. It was nothing but smoke and mirrors. It was.
But then why has, and again, I don't know, and I feel like you're more of an authority on this perhaps than I am, but why now has Trump reversed even those 10 drugs, the Biden stuff?
Well,
really is serious
okay, what he's doing right now, and this is all I can guess, it's just simply guesswork as I watch it happen. He has to bring the price of drugs down. Okay, he's been too strong on that promise. There has to be something tangible about the inflationary process that's happening in America. Medicine hits it. Medicine hits it across the board because everybody has to go buy medicine for their family, for their children. You know, so it's a real victory if he can do that. I don't know that that's where it's going to go.
Well, I mean, as I say, I don't know why he rolled back the 10. I get it; they weren't enough.
There was no reason. There was no reason to roll back the 10, other than to say the 10 it's meaningless when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, I mean, I took it kind of. I know he does a lot of this stuff where he kind of takes it personally. He goes after everything that's Biden or whatever. But to your point, on the first administration, he had 4 years, and damn it, I was hoping. In fact, I said, look, I know that there's a lot of negative Trump stuff, and you know, my audience, there are a lot of, a lot of us are not big Trump fans, to say the least. But I said, hey, look, this guy, with all of this political currency he has a chance to really make some, if he could really get an infrastructure bill through, if he could really get a reduction in pharmaceutical costs, he's the guy who can do it, because I think he can push it through. People are more reluctant to challenge him. So I'm frustrated that he had 4 years to do it and he didn't.
Right. What they missed is he only really started paying attention about last year and a half of his administration, to speak to your point. The problem, Mark, is this book, the Middleman. It's here's the way it's set up to give you a sense of exactly how mobster-like this is. One of the characters in the book that drives the storyline is a fellow named Devlin. He's a mobster from Ireland who's been raised by the mob. He was like a runner for the mob in Ireland. He grew up, the Irish mob basically raised him. They put him in universities. They educated him. They made him look like the CEO of any major corporation. So he comes to America and he says, wow, I see the pharmacy companies making trillions of dollars. If they do something illegal, they don't go to jail. We slap them on the hand, say bad boy, and then it's a get out of jail free, because the Department of Justice is so dysfunctional that if it's a white collar criminal, they're going to treat that criminal differently than they do a kid on this corner with a hoodie on selling 5 ounces of marijuana. Because the white collar criminal, the Devlin characters, like in this book, they don't look like criminals. They have Armani suits on. They have white hair they look like CEOs. They have great educations. They wear a Rolex watch. They drive a Bentley. They fit into this culture that we've accepted in our society that we're supposed to treat them differently. So Devlin is the vehicle that tells that story. Because even in the book, we see the Department of Justice having plenty of opportunities to do the right thing, but they don't do it. And I live that almost every day, Mark, on every case that I handle. The next book that's coming out is on baby formula. It's on the NEC crisis, where children are dying. Preemie children are dying by the hundreds because they're being fed baby formula. Well, we saw the New York Times just this week. They come up with a story that says the defense firm that defended the company on the baby formula against Abbott, that they now are in charge. Their key person is now in regulatory with the FDA. So there's so many moving parts that the public misses. And unfortunately, I can't. Look, I did media, MSNBC for many years. I was a commentator on a lot of shows. And I've watched it devolve. I haven't watched it evolve, it's devolved. And now it's a propaganda mechanism. They don't talk about stories like this. They don't talk about the fact that we could completely do away with 40% of the cost if we just pay attention to this one thing. It's almost, Mark, as if they don't understand it. It's not low-hanging fruit, so we're not going to try to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the media side. I'd see, and you've already addressed the political side, which is drenched in money, and that's the reason nothing happens. But it's interesting you have a whistleblower in this book, and it makes me wonder, where are the whistleblowers in
they're real. Yeah, most of the time, I would say in easily 50 to 60% of all the cases I handle. And they're not, again, they're national cases. They're opioids and PFAS and, big pharmaceutical cases. I would say 50 to 60% of the time we have whistleblowers that drive that case. That's where we get our information. Matter of fact, there's services that we hire. Our investigators are, masters at finding whistleblowers. But there's services out there, if you can believe it, that go after disgruntled employees, and they find, what's your story? Tell us your story. And so a whistleblower is going to be helpful. They're not necessary, but they're a nice thing to have. They can get you started into the case. That happens in this case. Before the murders start happening, a whistleblower comes forward and tells a sobering case, because they have the inside information about how a PBM actually operates.
Yeah, I mean, it's educating your audience, which you always do in your books, and then it's the thriller part of it. I'm curious, you are so high profile. Has your stuff? It feels Netflix series worthy. You know what I mean? It feels very. I'm wondering if that has it.
They're working on. Yeah, they're working on screen. Yeah, they're working on screenplays on all this. Each book I've written has several stories, and it does fit into that type of. It does fit into that type of profile. I don't write because of that. It's not, I don't set out and say, let me write this like a screenplay would unfold, but they naturally do. They're kind of,
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt. I was going to say you have a running character. You have a main character.
Yes.
Like you could, and that I love for these serialized things that I'm seeing more of. That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah. They basically have been the same characters, adding one or two as we go in each book. This book has such an interesting character. He's a PJ. PJ, most people have never heard of. They're called pararescue men. They're trained with the Air Force, and they're special ops people. So he hurts himself in Afghanistan. He's 22 years old, ends up going to law school, comes back and is hired by Dichotomous at the law firm. And he becomes this really interesting operator. As Deke's talking to him, he says, Michael, this is what I have in mind. And Deke is thinking in terms of this is how it should be done legally. Michael's thinking about how it should be done just to get to the end the quickest. So he's just a wonderful character. I think people will really like him. It's the second book I've put him in. He was in the last book, Suspicious Activity, and they seem to really like that character. But it's fun to create new characters as we go. You know,
I'm sure. And but I love that you feel tethered to realities, which kind of give your characters just another texture, a real texture. So I have a couple of just quick questions because I'm going to get them, and I want to make sure that I attend to what will likely be an issue. When you talk about these PBMs, you talk about the CVS Caremark, the Express Scripts, that Optimum RX. There was just a bunch of information showing that they had essentially marked up these prices, as you alluded to and earlier in our conversation, in such a big way that one can feel overwhelmed. We've talked about the ways in which they have a grip on the government. We've talked about the ways in which lawmakers are reluctant to change this system. What can people do? What can my audience do to push back on this?
Well, I wish there was an easy answer, Mark. There's not. This whole process is so embedded in our culture, right? One thing people have a tendency, and I see this trying cases all the time. I mean, the most horrendous kind of conduct, and you'll give an opening statement, and you'll almost see the jury that it's almost a suspension of disbelief, right? Because we want to believe that corporate America at least is fair. And then they hear these outrageous, what sounds like outrageous stories, like the tobacco company or the opioid industry, where it killed 150 people every day. Every day you woke up, 150 people died. And then they see the documents where the company knew about it. And they don't want to buy into it because it's so contrary to what they want to believe, that the system works well. And it's kind of a hiding, let me hide from that. So people, the general public does that too. And it really comes down sometimes to a phone call, to understanding the story well enough, understanding what's really happening. Moreover, who are the 3 or 4 people that are really allowing this to happen? Congress is set up in such a way that the way a bill moves through Congress, the way change moves through Congress, is arduous, and they do it for this very reason. And unless you go after the 3 people that are holding everything back, then you have, a surprise on this one. You'll be shocked. You'd never guess. AOC has gotten so much money from the industry. And you think, well, you see, I think I have a luxury when I write these books. And that is, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I started out as a progressive commentator that was probably the only progressive commentator on Fox News, right? So I'm able to step back and be honest with it and try to call balls and strikes. And sometimes in that process, I surprise myself. Sure. And it surprised me about how much even AOC is getting from the industry.
So you're saying, so even people like AOC, who you associate with progressive politics as being sort of a force to protect the public, you're saying even she is bought and paid for, it would appear, or compromised in some way.
Absolutely. There's nothing tribal about these books. Yeah. Okay. Every book I've written, there's nothing tribally Democrat or Republican. It simply is telling the story based on my experience in that case.
But I didn't mean to interrupt, but so you're telling me, in answer to my question, that there's not much that my audience can do to change the system?
I wish I could say there was, Mark, other than understanding the story and taking the time, taking a minute and writing a letter to the editor. Sure. It's the impact of 1,000 letters is a big impact.
Right.
But to get 1,000 letters, somebody has to write one, right? Somebody has to start that process. This book, I think, the timing on the book couldn't be any better. If you look at the New York Times, the title to their story is The Middleman. It was just lucky. I mean, the timing was just absolutely lucky where I named this book The Middleman. Now, anytime you hear about a PBM, it's a middleman. That's what they're talking about. So, so you have to make the first step. And I don't think I ever write a book, Mark, thinking that it's going to be a dramatic change to what we do culturally. But I think it's important that people at least have the right in a source to be able to process all the facts. Reading the newspaper every day won't get you there. The best source, I think, of any of news is what you're doing right now. I mean, if I'm really in search of news, I'm going to places like the things you talk about. That's the only way we can prepare ourselves to understand how insidious this stuff is.
At least there are deeper dives here, I think, in these conversations and others like it, and I know that you're used to having them. Let me just ask you as we kind of finish up here, new administration, RFK Jr., I think we've alluded to him in this conversation. If we hadn't, I know it was rolling around in my head because I see a guy who, controversial as he is a very different player on the field.
Oh, my God.
And a lot of what you're talking about may require a fresh look. So if anybody could, he's talked about eliminating advertising for pharmaceutical companies.
Wonderful.
Yeah. He's talked about a lot of stuff. And so these PBMs and just the manner in which the American public, those who are desperately in need of these medications, the ways in which they're fleeced, that has to be on his agenda as well. I would ask you, to what extent you have faith that he can follow through on these things, if you see impediments to what he may want to do, or if how much of it is talk and how much will he actually
Mark, I have to answer it with a little bit of bias. Mark, Bobby Kennedy used to be my law partner. Okay, we tried some of the biggest pharmaceutical cases in America. The PFAS cases that you'll hear about, those were started with the first trials we tried, and first one was against DuPont in Spelter, West Virginia, right?
That was the dumping?
That was the dumping. That was one of the dumping cases. This was where we had a horrendous case. I mean, the jury came back with $395 million where they had offered us $10 million. But but let me talk about Bobby. I've been in trial with Bobby. He is a true believer. Okay, this is not a show, Mark. What you see, Bobby, is not a show. It's as real as you've ever seen. In trial, the best thing I can borrow from, they're 18, 19-hour days. Well, he's there with me doing that for 3 months because he believes in what he's talking about. Now, the media, it's easy to take these anecdotal stories like, the bear story in the park, or whatever this story might be. It's easy to take those things, string them together, take his position on vaccines, which was wholly misunderstood, completely, utterly blown out of proportion. His position was, do we really want to inject our children with something that hasn't been tested? Do we really want to use the American public as guinea pigs? That was his whole position on vaccines. And people made that into, well, he's an anti-vaxxer. Well, hell, he's not an anti-vaxxer. He's telling the folks right now in where they're having problems with measles.
Texas and New Jersey.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Use this vaccine. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think he's going to make inroads. I hope that he does. He has the courage to do it. He certainly has the discipline to do it. And he absolutely has the knowledge to do it. He's one of the smartest people I think I've ever worked with in the legal profession, to tell you the truth.
He's a remarkable honestly, that's one of the most overwhelming things. It's tough to know what you don't know because stuff from him is coming at you so fast.
Yeah, it is.
And I know he's been, I think you've done like real heavy lifting on the environment and these environmental cases. And sadly, with him, that's why I mention it. And sadly, I think that's how stuff gets done now in this culture. The only way to hold these companies to account is through the legal system, the civil litigation that you've done. Money is the only penalty.
It's the last line in the sand, Mark.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, when media fails, regulators fail. Regulators simply, in this book, you'll see regulators are just brought into the company. They're paid by the company, which happens every day. every day in this country. Regulator has a job for $150,000. Hey, Joe, how would you like to come with me and make $300,000?
Sure. We're over time, but I wanted to ask you my very last question. I could see how you get really frustrated, how one can become so frustrated with this process, and for all the reasons that you suggested. You can just feel so completely lost in a system that seems built to screw you. So you end up maybe in the kind of situation where there's a vigilantism, like what we saw against that CEO, Brian Thompson, and on the streets of New York. He was the United Healthcare guy who was killed. I wonder if you can give me a thought on that. If you feel and notice within the society that you are so deep in, where you see this, the kind of bought and paid for representation and regulation. I wonder if you can speak to the frustration that builds up in the public and these kind of these acts of frustration, maybe spelled out in kind of individual terrorism.
Well, United Health, they have such a horrible history. I mean, it's just everybody has been burned by them. They've had family members die because they couldn't get the coverage. There's been all kinds of ugly stories. At the end of the day, though, even as doing this every day, I mean, you can imagine the frustration and the cynicism that flows with confronting these companies like these PBMs, just one example. But you still have to understand that we have a rule of law, and that you have to understand that regardless of how we're critical of capitalism, if there's anybody that you ever talk to, it should be me, because I see the really ugly underbelly of how capitalism goes wrong. But I still come back to the idea, what sets us apart is we have a rule of law. We have a jury system that does work. We have a judicial system that does work. It doesn't get the kind of results that this young man thought he was getting by killing this man that has 2 children and a wife. But it's long game, sometimes it's long game. And I have to see it. It's very difficult for me to sometimes to sit through the depositions where I'm sitting across the table from a true sociopath. He doesn't look like a sociopath. He's dressed up like a CEO, but he's a sociopath, and understand that person's making decisions for my family and my neighbors.
Well, it's fascinating the work you do, and it's remarkable that you're able to do as much as you do on the legal side and still be as prolific as a writer. Again, The Middleman is a new book that we will link to at the bottom of this video so people can get it, and it sounds like get educated while also taking a great thrill ride. So really do appreciate you joining us always, Mike. Really
well, thank you. Thank you for the work you do, Mark.
Thanks so much, pal. Mike Papantono, everybody. Yep, right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It is the Mark Thompson Show, and I know we're so lucky to have him. David Cay Johnston waiting in the wings, and I feel bad for keeping him waiting. You know him. He is the Pulitzer Prize-winning author and investigative journalist, and he joins us every Tuesday. Very fortunate for us to have David Cay Johnston in the mix, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Well, good to be back with you.
You're wearing the SoCal High School colors. You're looking good.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. You're exactly right.
There you go. So I wanted to bring up this Liberation Day. This is what we're getting. Tomorrow, America's Liberation Day, according to Trump. That's when the new tariffs are expected to go into effect against Canada and Mexico, our neighbors, and China and the European Union. The White House is calling this Make America Wealthy Again. And they're going to have a big press conference in a couple of hours in the Rose Garden at the White House. Trump says he's expecting $5 trillion in U.S. investments when his tariffs take effect. But he also, David Cay Johnston, says he doesn't care if these tariffs push the cost of a car in America way up high. The markets are all over the place. What's going on with Liberation Day? Are we really being liberated from anything?
Yes, we're being liberated of our money.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, tariffs are really a scheme to provide additional revenue and what are called by economists supra-normal, that is above what should be by market standards profits, to the owners of manufacturing companies, domestic manufacturing companies. And so when we raise the price of a car built in Germany or England or Japan, the domestic manufacturers of cars are going to raise their prices almost up to the amount of the competing vehicle with the tariff applied to it. And that just increases their profits. Even if they sell fewer cars, their profits should still go up. The problem here is that Donald doesn't understand competitive market economics. He is a mercantilist. You know, the reason that the Queen of Spain, not Isabella, but the Queen of Spain, who was a teenage girl, sent the fleet to attack the British was because British pirates in the Caribbean stole a lot of gold from the Spanish. And they did this again and again and again, because back in that day, 400 or 500 years ago, every dollar, every piece of gold you had was a dollar or a piece of gold I didn't have. And there was no concept of growing wealth. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, you know, our Constitution even provides for pirates. The references to letters of marque, M-A-R-Q-U-E. And we're really quite good as a species at creating wealth. We're not so good at distributing that wealth, but we're very good at creating wealth. And Donald doesn't understand any of that, even though he has a degree in economics. And think about this, you know, the only union president America ever had as president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, set out to destroy unions and did a damn good job of it. The president who has an economics degree, Donald Trump, doesn't know anything about economics because he didn't go to class. He didn't learn anything. His daddy
was the best student in the world, wasn't he? The top student. He was so great.
He says. It's kind of funny for a guy who is so eager to promote himself. There's no record anywhere of him making Dean's List, honor roll, being magna or summa, none whatsoever. Because of course it just didn't happen, and Donald doesn't understand that people can go check the record that exists. So tomorrow, I will not be surprised if Donald punts. He makes a lot of noise and then doesn't really do what we think he's going to do, which is a blanket tariffs on all goods.
Yeah.
But if he does this, the American economy will get a lot worse. And let me give you one of the great examples. I've gotten 3 emails in the last 3 days for traveling from the East Coast to Europe, round trip, for $449 on brand name airlines, Scandinavian, United, and sorry, I don't remember the third one at the moment. If you want to go to Europe, it's a good time to go, because the airlines have already announced that they're going to retire a lot of big planes, older planes, Boeing 767s and 757s in particular, and some of the older 777s that came out in the late 90s or mid 90s. But until they can contractually remove those planes, they're going to have lots of seats, and they're going to try really hard to sell them cheap. So you want to get on the plane at SFO or LAX and go to Europe, or send a college graduate there, a high school graduate, to go backpacking. The time is here. Do it now. Because once they've retired a lot of planes and have their seats adjusted for the demand, which will be a lot lower. Now, I live about 90 miles by car from the Canadian border and 3 hours from Toronto. There's already a palpable decline in people coming here from Canada. And it's going to get worse. So this is not going to make for a strong, healthy economy. And Donald has this just cockamamie idea you can't get out of his head, that China and Canada and Mexico are going to pay these tariffs when they're not going to pay anything. We're going to pay.
It seems like he's using the tariffs up till now as a negotiating tactic. But there, I would think, is only so much you can do with that before it starts to look like you're really not going to do much at all. And it loses its negotiating power because it looks like it's something you're not serious about.
Well, he's gotten a couple of things that he thinks make him look good. The president of Mexico sent 10,000 Mexican soldiers up near the border, and he hails that as a great victory. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't think the record is clear yet on what they're doing and what that means. Mm-hmm. But imagine you owned Kim Boren widgets, And Donald Trump says, stop making your widgets in China or finishing them up and polishing them in Canada. Make them here in the United States. And if you don't, there's going to be this huge tariff. And so you sit down with your team and outside vendors and say, okay, we're not going to build a new widget factory. We're going to go out and build it east of LA or over in near Stockton in the Central Valley. And they tell you, well, the new factory is going to cost you $1 billion. And from the moment we leave this room till the first widget comes off the assembly line, it's going to be, let's assume they can do it quickly, 7 years. You're going to make $1 billion decision with a 7-year deferral till it happens on the basis of Donald Trump, who flip-flops on policies and in particular tariffs by the week? No, of course you're not going to do that because you're a sane, normal person and you're trying to maximize profits. Donald's just trying to bamboozle people and cover up the fact that he has no idea what he's doing. None.
So his former Secretary of the Interior, who is a Congressman, Ryan Zinke from Montana, he says Trump loves to wave these tariffs around because it's personal power. That he doesn't have to go through Congress. He can exercise personal power. And for him, it makes him feel strong and, I don't know, manly, apparently.
Yeah, no, Zinke is exactly right about that. Because Donald isn't a person of substance, he's a person of appearances. And that's what Donald is, all appearances. You know, he appears to be a genius businessman. No, he's not. You know, he appears to be one of the biggest developers in New York, never was. He appears to be the great Don Juan, you know, nonsense. And don't forget, you know, he really only weighs 225 pounds, which anybody looking at him can see. Of course, that's true. Just look at him. To those who aren't watching my face, I'm being sarcastic. Donald is in a job now where he has people who are really trying to make things happen. He's not the one making them happen. And, you know, Congress has given the president these emergency powers on tariffs. The Senate is debating, I think it's this afternoon, but it may be tomorrow, limiting or taking away that power from Trump. Trump put out on Truth Social a statement attacking Tim Kaine, the junior senator from Virginia, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate 8 years ago, in which he says, you know, he and the other Democrats are trying to stop my tariffs on fentanyl. I'm sorry. What we want to do is raise the price of fentanyl through tariffs. I thought we wanted to eliminate fentanyl, except for its proper use by physicians in in properly prescribed medical conditions. I mean, it just indicates that he doesn't know what he's doing. And the volume of fentanyl compared to all the other trade is bupkis. It's an irrelevancy. It's, you know, one sheet of paper in the Library of Congress.
So you mentioned this, and I'll go into it a little further, but Susan Collins, a Republican from Maine, is saying that she will back a resolution led by Virginia Senator Kaine, who's a Democrat, to terminate this national emergency Trump declared last month, citing this fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigration. And this is what Trump has used to justify these 25% across the board tariffs on Canada. And so now you have Republicans and Democrats lining up to oppose these Trump tariffs. And I don't know if that's a win for Trump.
It's not a win for Trump if they actually act. In the case of Susan Collins, you know, she always talks a good game and then she folds.
Yeah.
So we'll see if Susan Collins actually goes through and has the spine to stand up to Donald Trump on any issue. But members of Congress and the Senate are hearing from the economic interests in this country that, what are you doing here? You're sowing disruption. You're sowing uncertainty. And if there's anything you want in business, it's certainty. You know, you certainly want, there's so many things you have no control over. You don't need your government adding to things that you have no control over. And if you know, the constituents in various Republican districts, people have been showing up and they stand up in front of the cameras and they say, hi, I'm a lifelong Republican. And what the H are you doing?
Yeah.
And you know, why are you disrupting Social Security? Oh, we're not disrupting Social Security. We're going to make it better. We're stopping all those thieves. And you can hear the whole room erupt because they know that's nonsense. There's no massive thievery going on.
Yeah.
Now they've said they're going to throw out the existing Social Security computer systems, which are based largely on ancient computer languages. You know, languages from the 1950s and 60s, that's like Linear B from the ancient Mediterranean, or the language of the Sumerians 4,000 years ago. But you know what? Those systems work. They have flaws and whatnot, but they've been refined and they work just fine. And if you were going to do that, if you're going to create a new system, you would want to keep the current system running while you set up the new system. You test it with a small number of people, and then you migrate people over to the new system. That's not what they're going to do. And if they aren't stopped, there's going to come a day when millions of people are going to discover they don't have their Social Security check. But remember what Trump's billionaire Secretary of Commerce said. Well, if you don't send a check, you know, my mother wouldn't call and complain.
Right. The complainers are the fraudsters. Right.
Yeah. The way to identify the fraudsters is they'll be the first to complain. I mean, this is such a cockamamie, out of touch view of the world. And yet lots of people who depend on Social Security, if not for themselves, then for, their mother or grandmother or grandfather, they don't have the resources to get by. Take away Social Security and about 90% of seniors will be in poverty.
Yeah.
And yet you see people standing up other people and endorsing this. And it's because they don't understand how things work. They have the critical thinking skills to appreciate this, and they want to believe that Donald Trump is their savior, even though he's the exact opposite.
You mentioned that not a mark of success is creating anxiety in the economy. And I saw this article, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, and the headline reads that he says almost everyone he talks to is more anxious about the economy than at any time in recent history.
Yeah. I believe me, I absolutely understand that. We've taken almost all of our money, we did this a few months ago, out of the stock market and put it into cash, where you can earn basically the rate of inflation plus the taxes on it. And that's about it. You're not going to have any growth, but there's no downside risk. And the market's down. It continues trending downward.
Yep.
And if these tariffs come in, it's going to drop very sharply, which means the people who have cash will have a buying opportunity somewhere in the future. But no one who took and successfully completed 2 economics courses thinks what Donald Trump is saying is correct. Tariffs are very important to developing countries if they want to develop their own industry. That's why we use tariffs in the very beginning. You want to buy, you're living in the new United States of America, and you need to buy a stove, and the domestic manufacturers aren't very good. They don't have very much capital. They can't produce very much. So you're going to order your stove from England. And by putting a tariff on that stove, it allowed the domestic maker to raise their price, get more money, use it to improve their factories, improve their techniques of production until they were up to the speed of the Brits, and then they could compete with them. They are inherently anti-competitive, and they are redistributional up. And, that's my trilogy on the American economy: perfectly legal on taxes, free lunch on subsidies, the fine print on monopolies and restraint of trade, is all about these stealth mechanisms that took money from 99% of the public and put it into the pockets of people at the top. So that almost all the wealth growth in this country in the last 40, 50 years has been among people in the top 10%. About 34 million people right now, or about 10 million households. And that's where all the growth is going. And even within that group, it's overwhelmingly going to the top 10th of 1%. That's 1 in 1,000 households. And that's Trump's crowd. People who either are in or are servants to or aspire to be in the $2.5 million and up income class. And that has nothing to do with the reality of most Americans. But, they don't know that. I mean, I remember I had lunch with a guy here in Rochester, very wealthy, successful financier. And he was telling me he just didn't believe any of this nonsense about people living on $25,000 a year. This was in the late 90s, raising a family on $500 a week, $26,000. It was just ridiculous. I asked him what he paid his secretary. I said, he didn't give me the exact amount, but what's the range? And he hedged a little. I said, I'm going to guess north of 60 and perhaps as much as 80. And he went, yeah. And that makes sense because he needs a very super highly skilled secretary who understands finance and has flawless grammar, something that's disappearing fast in this country.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the problem, Jeff, is that you got in contact with people in the general labor pool. And I suggested he and I have lunch with a mutual friend who owned a steel company. They cut and bend steel, the metal bending and metal cutting business. And he said, why? And I said, because he hires out of the general labor pool and he can tell you the social problems. Now, he is more in your camp than mine about how to address these issues. But he's going to tell you that you're completely wrong. There really are lots of families struggling to raise kids on $25,000 a year, which in today's money would be $45,000, I think, a little less than double. And the people around Trump, the people in his cabinet, they're from this top tier. And by the way, don't miss what else Donald is doing. He is pardoning high-level, white-collar criminals.
Yeah.
He fired the prosecutor who had gotten the indictment of the CEO of the Fat Burger chain, which we don't have back here, but it's a big chain out west, who embezzled $47 million from the company, according to the indictment. He fired that guy. Presumably that charge will now go away. There was another white-collar CEO literally on his way to prison after being sentenced. In the van, Donald pardoned him. He's pardoned yet another head CEO who I think his trial had not yet come about. But he is systematically pardoning these rich white thieves.
Yeah.
Now, to think that this is being done because of his ideological commitment and there's nothing else going on around is, frankly, Kim, naive.
Yeah.
I doubt that they're directly paying off Donald, but could they be doing something on behalf of, one of his kids, some obligation he has somewhere, helping Elon Musk? Oh, yeah. I think that's a highly reasonable assumption to make.
You mentioned
Jen, can you come here?
You mentioned the man who was pardoned on his way to jail. That was Aussie Media CEO Carlos Watson,
yes,
who was convicted of a financial conspiracy. He pardoned electric truck CEO's Trevor Milton, who was free on bail pending his appeal, but facing 4 years in prison and hundreds of $millions in restitution. He seems to be pardoning people that are in big business, including crypto.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is, and what you're seeing here is a criminal presidency.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump's a lifelong career criminal. He's now got 34 felony convictions. And if he hadn't been elected, he would be convicted by now in other cases. And the people he's pardoning are other white collar criminals, because after all, when we do things, that's different. We're special.
I saw a comment by Steve Bannon. He said, if Trump doesn't win in 2028, that Trump will be going to jail. And I was thinking, well, why? Because all of the cases against him haven't either been dismissed or seem to be on permanent pause. Has he done something recently that would send him to jail?
Yeah.
Or is that being used to stoke fear, like, oh, all you Trumpers that love him better rally around him for a third term?
No, it depends on who becomes president of the United States next. But I mean, the flaw in the Biden era was that while his attorney general, Merrick Garland, did start right away ordering investigations of Trump, he let him go along at a lackadaisical pace, and they made a crucial legal error. They brought the strongest case, which was the stolen national security documents case, in Florida. Right. The Constitution says that you must be tried in the jurisdiction where the crime occurred. Well, if you rob a bank and you take the money to your home, The crime is not at your home. Your crime is at the bank. And they should have prosecuted Donald Trump in D.C. The Justice Department believed, for whatever reason, probably noise from Trump's lawyers or conservative people within the Justice Department, that Trump would fight any indictment in D.C. And I think that was just a major mistake, because had they indicted him in D.C., which was the scene of the crime, this would have gone through, and he would not have had the luxury of a dishonest judge, an utterly corrupt judge, Eileen Cannon, overseeing his case, and who is a very, very good shot at being the next justice of the United States Supreme Court, despite being utterly unqualified. And just let me point out, Kim, you don't have to be a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court. You don't have to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House, which leads me to just another point. There's a lot of discussion about this third term issue you brought up. The Constitution is quite clear. You cannot be elected more than twice to be president. And if you become president the way Jerry Ford did, and you serve more than, I think it's 26 months, more than 2 years, you can only run once. I'd give you 6 or 6.5 years. But there are ways around this. One of them is Donald runs as vice president, and whoever is president resigns. Now, why you would keep that deal and give up being president of the United States for Donald is an interesting question. But, you know, presumably someone who is as utterly lacking in morals and principles as J.D. Vance might go along with that. His ego might be weak enough that he'd go along with it. But there's another method. You get the Republicans, if they retain control of the House, which I think is increasingly unlikely, to make you Speaker. Then you get two toadies elected president and vice president. They resign. The next person in line is the Speaker of the House. A Supreme Court not run by ideologues, I think, would look at, you ran as vice president, the president then resigns so you can become president for a third term, would look at that as a sham. But the whole notion of what are shams is being rapidly eroded in this country. And, you know, we are legalizing, and we've been doing this since before Trump. Our Supreme Court has been legalizing corruption step by step now for a number of years. If you're the governor of California and I need something, if I walk up to you and say, hey, Kim, here's $1 million. If you do this for me, that's the corruption even to this Supreme Court. But if I say, you know, I really need this, my friend, it would really be helpful. And then as you're providing the advice, I say, by the way, wouldn't your kids love to come in my private jet and stay on my private island for a week's vacation? That's not a bribe.
Oh.
This is an absurdity and a complete lack of recognition of human behavior. So, yeah, I think it's highly likely that Trump, if he is out of office in January of 29, which is highly uncertain in my mind. I don't see him peacefully leaving the White House, just as I didn't believe he'd do it 4 years ago, and he did not.
He didn't.
He will have committed crimes between now and then. And by the way, let me point out, he has not filed his legally required statement of financial condition with the Office of Government Ethics, OGE, Office of Government Ethics, OGE.gov. And made it clear he doesn't intend to file it. So for all we know, Vladimir Putin's putting money in his pocket. Elon Musk has guaranteed his roughly $600 billion in civil judgments that are currently undergoing appeal. We don't know. And then even if he does file, of course, Donald's finances are often smoke and mirrors.
And technically, it doesn't matter if he files or not, because he has immunity for everything, right? Just about.
He has immunity for any official act.
Oh, yeah.
I've read that decision and thought about that very point. And you could argue that failure to commit an official act you have immunity for. We do that a lot in the Constitution. We have the Commerce Clause. And then if you look at the reverse of it, it's the Dormant Commerce Clause. So I don't know how this Supreme Court would rule on his failing to do an official act, filing that document. But you know what? There are penalties in the law if you fail to do it. They might uphold those.
Well, I know our time is running out, but I had this one more story I wanted to throw at you. And I would think, in my mind, Harvard Law School is a pretty prestigious place, right?
Oh, yeah.
So a majority of the Harvard Law School faculty sent this letter to their students over the weekend, warning that the rule of law now faces grave threats under the Trump administration. This is the faculty at Harvard Law School. They wrote in their individual capacities, not as representatives of Harvard Law, but they voiced their concerns, according to this article, that legal precepts and the institutions designed to uphold them are starting to buckle. And in doing so, they referenced President Trump's executive orders targeting these individual law firms for retribution because of their legal work that have challenged him in the past. And so they're worried about our legal system. These are very prestigious Harvard law professors that are looking at what's going on and warning their students, saying we're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that they're right and they're too mild about this. I mean, we saw the Paul Weiss law firm knuckle under to Donald Trump and promise to provide, I think it's $40 million of pro bono legal aid to friends of his. In a normal administration, we would say that's extortion. Extortion is the other side of bribery. You know, bribery is I give you money to do something. Extortion is you better do it or I'll hurt you. And he's made it clear he will hurt people and hurt firms. He's tried to take away national security clearance for law firms so that they cannot represent people, particularly firms with a long history of representing Democrats. You know, we have firms that their specialty is they represent Republican interests and ones who do Democratic Party interests. And he's trying to further unlevel the playing field. So the concerns being raised by Harvard Law School, I think, are very valid. I've written a DC report that on February 15th, when Donald announced that anything he does to save the country cannot be illegal, that's the day, without question, he became our dictator, and he's just consolidating power. And that the White House 3 times, a few days later, posted a picture of him with a regal crown and "Long live the king" is the caption. And, you know, you can say, well, he's just trying to own the libs. These are not silly juvenile matters. These are serious matters. He is trying to consolidate power. That's why he's fired inspectors general. He's gotten rid of individuals all throughout the government who are a challenge or threat to his absolute monarchical power, if not tyrannical power. And we just saw that 3 professors at Yale, Timothy Snyder, who wrote On Freedom and on Tyranny, very important books on stage and very short, quick books.
He's been on the show, as a matter of fact.
Yes,
recently.
no, I know he has. Jason Stanley, who wrote This Is How Fascism Works, another short but very important book. And then Marcy Shore, a historian of Eastern Europe. They've all left Yale to go to the University of Toronto. And Jason Stanley's quite explicit. I do not want my children to grow up in a fascistic country.
Wow.
And we are living right now under a dictatorship. They are simply consolidating power. They are simply making sure that forces can't rise up against them. I noticed somebody in the chat, by the way, said I put my money in cash. What does that mean, or where did I put it? There's something called a federal money market money. And right now, money markets, depending on which one you're in, are paying 3.7 to 4.2% interest. Inflation was running under Joe Biden. It was down to below the average since World War II at about 2.7%. Under Trump, it's rising and rising fast. The latest report, if it holds up, would be a 5% annual inflation rate, essentially double what Biden was down to at the end of his administration. So money in a money market fund, as more money comes into it, the rates will go down, by the way. But more people say I'm out of the market, the rates will come down. But the markets are down, and I believe they'll continue to be down. Nobody knows where markets are going to go. It may be that he announces the tariffs and the markets suddenly rise rapidly and I'll lose out. That's okay. At my age, I'm worried about protecting the downside, not gaining on the upside. And by the time you're my age, I hope people, if they have managed to save and invest money, don't think of it as their money. It's not my money. I'm the steward of my children and grandchildren's money. Little as they will get, it's not mine, it's theirs. And I just get to use the income during my lifetime.
I have so much more to talk to you about, from scientists saying there's a climate of fear in America.
Oh, of course there is.
Yeah, and people who are not the elite that we were talking about before, the people who voted because of the price of eggs, who are so upset now that the price of insulin is spiking. There's so much more I could say and keep you on for another 2 hours, but I know I'm over my David Cay Johnston time frame. And so thank you for being here. I just love you, and I'm so lucky to have you.
Well, thank you, Kim. Good principle for people to think about going forward. Economically, in terms of individual liberty, in terms of the integrity of law enforcement, it is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. It's going to get a lot worse. And if you use that as your guiding principle, are things getting better or worse, you'll do better riding this out. I wouldn't do anything risky right now. I would, if you don't need to buy a car and your car's going to hold up, or you can make it hold up for 3 or 4 years, keep driving that thing. Don't go out and spend a lot of money. This is not the time to go invest in a big house or something else. On the other hand, if you can get one of those super cheap airfares to Europe while they're here, if you plan to go to Europe, now's the time to go.
I've heard people are leaving. A lot of these scientists are checking out.
Yes.
When is that tripwire where it gets so bad that it's time to check out?
Well, most people will never leave. Let's be clear about that. Most people, no matter what, will not leave. I have a column that'll go up about this very issue at DC Report probably tomorrow. And it's about the 3 Yale professors and me, and some other people. But the trend line you need to pay attention to. And things like this are always murky. There's a lot of noise in the signal. But the general signal is this is a white male supremacist administration that believes in protecting its friends and prosecuting its enemies while claiming to be pure as the driven snow, and that's pursuing economic policies that nobody, and I mean nobody, who understands economics believes can work.
Yeah.
So
David
take care. Talk to you next week.
Bye. See you next time. David Cay Johnston on the Mark Thompson Show every Tuesday, and we'll look forward to speaking with him again next week. And I now have another person waiting in the wings, and I'm sorry that I'm a little behind schedule, but it's Tech Tuesday, and that means that Jefferson Graham is here, and he's going to be talking AI. We've got a new Alexa to review. The topics are endless with you as well. Welcome, Jefferson Graham.
Thank you. You know, I've been doing this travel thing for a few years now, and I've just decided I've had enough of it. I just want to let you know I'm not going to travel anymore. I'm staying home for the foreseeable future.
Is that true?
I'm not going to do any more photography, and I hate April Fool's jokes so bad.
Yeah. Yes. I was like, what? This isn't true. Happy April Fool's Day to you as well.
Yeah, it's so stupid, and the worst thing is going on Facebook and reading people's silly things that we all take for granted. And I read things and I think they're right?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, the day that Jefferson Graham doesn't travel is not going to happen. So you were telling me a little bit about AI art, and it's funny because when I think of AI, or I think of computing, or the way that AI could make our lives easier, I don't think of it taking intrinsically human created things like art. Like, that's not where my AI focus would be. I would be thinking, how AI is used in medicine, helping us diagnose people and making sure that there are fewer errors. But art, we don't need help with art, do we?
It's shocking how good it is.
Really?
And how fast it got. We have examples. Tony has some, and I think he should show some of them. I'd be very interested. Okay, there he is. There's the Mark Thompson Show.
Pretty good.
All I did, I uploaded a picture of Mark, and I said, make me a cartoon in the image of the Studio Ghibli, like they would do it. That's a Japanese studio. We have one of Kim as well. And I don't know if Kim is
Oh,
that one,
that's really funny.
Not good, but there's a better one coming. Kim behind a mic, which I thought was pretty good. There you are.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. Yeah.
I didn't know you had freckles.
No, not really. No,
Okay.
They got my rosy cheeks in there though, so
Yeah,
I
they
don't
did.
know. Oh,
Yeah,
that's funny.
I think that one's pretty good. I haven't really had a good one of me yet.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Oh, come on, I'm Asian in the photo.
No,
They
they got your hair right.
got the hair, and they got the vest, and they got the shirt, and of course they have the phone. I think they could have done better. What's next, Tony? What else do we have to look forward to? Okay, this is the Al Hirschfeld drawing rendition of me. For those of you who don't know, Al Hirschfeld was one of the great cartoonists, caricaturists. He worked for the New York Times, and used to every Sunday there'd be a wonderful caricature from him. I don't think we're still getting away with the caricatures. Let me quickly check. No, I tried doing a character, an Al Hirschfeld style of Kim, and I think we got away with it for a day, and then they stopped it because of copyright concerns. But that does look like Al Hirschfeld would have done it, except it's missing the Nina. He would always hide the name Nina in there in several ways. If you look next to his name at the bottom, there's a number, and that would tell you how many Ninas are in this picture of Clint Eastwood.
Oh, okay.
I can't see on the screen, but there's it looks like it's like 26 or 6 or something.
I can't see it. It's too small.
I think
Maybe
it's a 5.
Five,
It's a
yeah.
5.
Five.
Okay, can we find one Nina in there? Because I'm not seeing it yet. On the hat, maybe? It's at the top of the hat.
Oh, there it is. Nina, yeah. Yeah, Karen says he'd work his daughter's name into each drawing. That's sweet.
It's drawing. And so, he died when he was like 100 years old.
Oh,
and
wow.
so that meant Nina was like 80. She was like 80 years old when her dad died. But anyway, so this stuff is like, I say amazing. Tony, show the 1080p picture. Can you do that one? Do you have that? Because this one was, I'm sitting here, I'm illustrating a talk that I'm giving on Friday, and I'm doing the PowerPoint thing where you have to have a slide. You have the picture on every slide. And so I'm talking about how when I hand in my episode to Scripps News, I can't do 4K, they want 1080p. So I just said, draw me an old Uncle Sam-like drawing, but say we want 1080p. And 30 seconds later, there it was. Look at how good that is.
It's good, but it looks like it's just copying other people's work.
Well, it is. It is. But,
that's not good.
So the good part was how well they're doing it. The bad part is all these artists and graphic artists are going to not get the work, because had I called somebody and said, I want this, how long was it going to take? Could they zip it out in 5 seconds? I don't think so. Now, the downside is so many people are using these now. And now every blog is being illustrated with AI art. So now everything looks the same. So the person with an individual style is going to actually shine because of the sameness of what we're seeing. Right now, we're really excited, but it's getting a little monotonous. What do you think, Kim?
Well, then that new creative art is fed into the AI system, and that no longer becomes creative anymore either, because then everything is copied. It's just a matter of time until AI spits that back out as well.
But it's all looking the same. The picture of the young Asian girl on the top, that's so clearly AI. But the one on Trump, that's not bad. I don't know who the guy is with the white beard, but the one of Trump is pretty good.
That's actually the Studio Ghibli guy, Miyazaki. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the actual producer.
So this thing went viral last week, and they said that if you could do this if you spend $20 a month to subscribe to the service.
Of course you can.
Right, but as of today, they announced it's free, but only for 3. You can get it for 3 photos until they stop you. I finally paid the subscription because I use the thing a lot, but I was getting stopped all the time.
Wow.
On things. I'm actually giving a talk about AI on Saturday at the NAB conference in Las Vegas. So if anybody is out there wants to come, I have a full hour actually on how to use AI for brainstorming, and it's a great thing to do. It's actually a funny story. So my friend wrote a poetry book about baseball. His name is Henry Shipper. And so he wanted the local paper to do an interview with him. And I said, I don't think they'll have the time, but how about we just come up with 10 great questions to ask you and run it as a Q&A. So I just fed, give me 10 questions for Henry Shipper about his new baseball book. And they're really good questions, because what they did is they go into Amazon, they read the description of the book, they read the reviews of the book, they read the testimonials about the book, they read his IMDb page, and then they grind it all together, and they came out with some pretty good stuff.
And it looks like you did your homework, and really all you did was ask AI to help you out.
Yeah, but it's a great starting point. Usually the first reaction is, wow, this is incredible. The second reaction is, I have to rewrite all of this. But I'd rather rewrite than start with a blank page, wouldn't you?
The problem with that is, though, when you're in an interview and you've asked the AI generated question, and then you get the subject answering, there are things the subject might say that you would pick up on had you been the one doing the research or reading the book or whatever it may be, that you would just let go and not follow up on as you move to the next AI generated question. So there's some conversational art that's kind of lost there if we start relying on AI too much.
I agree. I mean, I when I interview people, I just ask them questions. I don't ask AI to look things up for me. But I have had it doing scripts and giving outlines and things like that. And so on the script, it starts off great. Then this is crap. And I have to rewrite every word of it. But again, it gives me a framework to start with, which I like.
Let's move to your next topic, because you say that there are some things that maybe we think are pretty good when we get them, and the shine wears off pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Are you talking about tech?
this is the AI art.
Oh, the AI tech stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
you
just think that if we're going to see it everywhere within the next 6 months, it's just going to be overkill.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
But I do like that drawing of you behind the mic. I thought that was pretty good.
I thought my favorite one is the one of Mark. I think that's the best one.
Yeah, that was good.
I could see us using that in some type of, promotional material. That's actually really
Now,
cute.
a year ago, they would have misspelled his name and they couldn't have gotten the words right. So, and the fact
Yeah.
that they get the words right now is pretty amazing. What Mark said to me this weekend is he thought the pictures, I sent him some pictures too, and he thought the pictures of both of us we look like Borscht Belt comics. But I don't think Mark looks like a Borscht Belt comic there.
I don't think so either. So in the last couple of weeks, you've been talking about the new Alexa. Finally, the reviews are coming in on the new Alexa. Yay or nay? It's a nay.
Well, no, I don't have it, but the reviews that I read were that all the promises that they made, not yet. It's exactly like with Apple, all these great things we're going to give you, and they're not exactly ready yet. So a lot of this takes time. And again, if you're going to buy the Alexa, if you're going to hope for the Alexa to work with you, I shouldn't say that name out loud, and I apologize to every listener right now. If you're going to ask for the Amazon Assistant to do its thing, it's not going to work on the old devices. You're going to need to buy a newer device. The Echo Show is the one that they want you to get. And my phone apologizes for making
No
lots of
worries.
noise. Yeah. You know the way.
What was wrong with the old A? Why do we need the new A? Is it somehow better, or is it just a money grab because they want you to upgrade?
More responsive, chattier. The big revolution in AI is that I say, "Tell me about Kim McAllister," and they go da 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 da, and I say, "And where did she work?" And I don't have to say, "Where did Kim McAllister work?" I'm able to continue the conversation.
Okay.
And that's one of the nice things about it, and that they remember everything that you asked. I actually said to do it yesterday. Hey, remember yesterday when you told me about this and that? And they said, yes, exactly. We know that. And I said, I want to follow up on that. And I asked AI what my YouTube Photo Walks viewers want from the show, and what are their desires, what are their pain points. It was a fun little exercise, and they gave me 100 things that they want from me.
That's it, huh?
100, yeah.
And was any of it helpful or useful to you?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah. And then the other thing is in this talk, I'm giving this talk on Sunday for 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours.
You'll be all right.
It's the longest one I've ever done. And of course, you talk for more hours than that every day, but you have people to interview. Thank God. I'll just be standing on stage. So I asked it to give me 100 questions that people might ask me from the audience, and that helped me expand my presentation.
One thing that you didn't give me as a topic, but I kind of saw and I wanted to throw out at you before I let you go, is that Apple is now, and maybe they have in the past as well, but it seems like a new development that they're turning their attention toward the health industry. Bloomberg reporting that they're revitalizing their health app that includes a new AI doctor that will personalize your care. And they're working to enhance their health sensors and work through roadblocks related to monitoring glucose and blood oxygen levels. They've got a food tracking feature that they're working on as well. All of this is expected to be released next year in Apple's new health AI product.
Yeah. Okay. So Tim Cook, who's the CEO of Apple, said, I think a year ago, that he wanted Apple to be known as a health company, not a device company. I thought that was a little overkill, but they have had great success with the watch. They get testimonials. I fell down. I had a heart attack. Blah blah blah.
It calls 911 for you.
Yeah. So it's been very successful. Can they put this stuff in the iPhone too? I don't think they can. That article you're mentioning was written by Mark Gurman, who is the king of Apple scoops, and he's never wrong. So, but sometimes the articles talk about things that will happen that take a little longer than expected. One of the things Mark wrote about, Mark Gurman, was that Apple was going to switch from a policy of buying phones to renting them, and we would just rent them every year, and then we wouldn't have to worry about reselling them and rebuying them and stuff like that. That didn't happen.
No.
But it's a good idea. I thought it was a good idea. And anything they can do to improve health from these devices that we're all chained to, why not?
Absolutely.
But I think it's mostly for the watch.
Yeah, well, I have a watch for my mom, and one time recently she fell, and the watch sent messages to my sister and I saying, "Your mom has fallen." And we called her, and she's like, I tripped. I'm fine. Everything's okay. But she had to stop her watch from calling 911. So I think it's better than the necklaces that you push, with the alarms. So I see them selling a lot of watches because of health reasons.
Yeah. And they're relatively cheap, $200 to $400 for something like that, which is pretty cool.
And
so
it makes
I hope that Mark is right, and I hope that your mother's doing great. And,
she's doing really well, and it makes her feel less old to have a watch instead of a life alert necklace or whatever it is.
I tripped over a rock this morning while I was reading the phone while walking, but luckily I caught myself.
You got to look up once in a while, Jefferson Graham.
I know. What can you do?
Thank you for being here, Jefferson Graham. Everybody have a great time this weekend giving your speech. Oh, here it is. Yeah, you were in New Orleans. This is so
New Orleans.
Cool.
Okay. Every person watching, I want you to do me a favor and go to youtube.com/PhotoWalksTV.
Mm-hmm.
Check out my New Orleans episode. This is one of my favorites I've ever done. One of the great cities, 20 years after Katrina, is coming back, doing great. Let the good times roll. And hope you have fun watching it, and let me know if you see it. I'd love to hear.
It looks like you got right in the middle of a jazz procession there. How fun is that?
Right after we got off the plane, I warned my wife, they do these second line parades on Sundays. And this one I found it was starting at 2:00. We landed at 12:30. We got to the hotel at 1:30, and I said, hurry. We got to get to this thing, because once they start, I won't know how to get there. I won't know how to find them. So I really wanted to check out the second line parade. And for those of you who don't know, a second line parade is like a jazz funeral, which starts off with slow dirge music, and then they let it rip, and they just celebrate the life, and everybody from the neighborhood comes out and starts dancing away.
So fun. You can find Jefferson Graham on YouTube, the Photo Walks TV series. Check out the New Orleans episode. Jefferson, thank you for being here.
Thank you. See you.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Love it. What a great time in New Orleans. So I can't wait to watch that episode. That'll be really great. Jefferson Graham, everybody. That's the way it is. And so we come to the end, Tony, of another Mark Thompson show.
We did it.
We did it. Mark will be back tomorrow. Very excited to report that Mark will be back tomorrow. John Rothman will be here tomorrow as well, so that's really exciting. And I'm sure Mark will have a lot to talk about, to tell us where he's been, what he's been up to, and how his hand is recovering. So we'll see all that. Yeah. Please join me on the after party next, the after
I'll
party
throw a link in
live.
chat.
Tony puts the link in the chat, so check it out. We've got a lot of great stories over there as well. Not political, but I'd love to have your subscription. Trying to get up to 2,500, which is really silly when you think about how many subscribers Mark has. We're more than 115,000 strong now.
I know.
So super exciting. Thank you for subscribing to the Mark Thompson Show. The MarkThompsonShow.com is the place to go to check out the Patreon and the PayPal link.
For the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Back at it tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific, here on the Mark Thompson Show. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah.
Bye.